Hey, this is Brian again, and I'd like to ask you to do a favor. We can't do this work without people like you, so if you can, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about Bring Back the Porch.
As we go through some of the objectives and the actions and then the tactics specifically related to the actions, the objectives are very broad. There's 9 and they're quite ranging from poverty reduction to economic development to truth and reconciliation to engaging with our neighbors. There's lots of pillars that define well-being, and so that's what makes the document so large. But there's lots of ability to kind of look at the objectives and some of the actions and say there's different ways that we can do this work, and we'll try some ways and see how that goes, and that's the kind of living part of it, that we can continue to work and develop those.
This episode of Bring Back the Porch brought to you by Bernie Leahy, River Street Realty. Let's get you home. If you were watching a recent city council meeting, you saw our guest today, Shona Dickie, who's the manager of community supports with the city of Medicine Hat. And you made an exhaustive presentation on something called momentum. And it really caught my attention because, first of all, it's a very ambitious undertaking. But what you have managed to accomplish in terms of community engagement is outstanding. So welcome to the porch.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Let's, begin at the beginning. Where did the idea for momentum come from?
It's been a few years in the making. We've really recognized that we don't have an updated plan. We had a social policy from 2004 that was kind of guiding some of the work that the city was doing. And then we had a report called the Thrive Plan, which was in 2017, but hadn't really got any momentum from that in our community. So we recognized the need to have something in place that could help guide my department within the city, but also other departments and the community as a whole, as to, how do we, there's lots of social issues right now, and so just trying to focus in our energy in certain areas that impact the community the most. So we said, we'd really like to get a plan going, and we had a great supportive council at the time that said, yeah, let's go ahead with that and approve that in 2023. So we hired consultants and, helped us kind of coordinate what we were going to do to get the plan together and what that looked like.
How did you come up with the title?
That was the consultant. I will give that to them. Mm-hmm. Urban Matters was our consultant on this, and they came up with that title. So
okay. I believe if you boil it down, it's like a 10-year strategy to enhance well-being in the community.
Correct, yeah.
That term well-being, though, was left undefined for a reason.
Yeah, and we really wanted to get the community's input, so community residents, but also some of our organizations that do some heavy and hard work in our community, and allow them to define what well-being look like specific to our community.
Yeah. Now, as I was saying before we started, the thing that jumped off the page at me when you made your presentation was the fact that as part of your engagement, we now have 5 neighborhood associations in Medicine Hat, which I don't think we've ever had before. So that in itself is positive. That
is excellent, and I will say that work started even prior to Momentum. That was one of Council's strategic priorities from the previous council to look at neighborhood associations. So we'd been kind of starting to work on that, and it also came up as a theme when we did our engagement, so it really kind of solidified the need to develop that a bit further.
Yeah, now there's 5, and you say maybe more on the way?
Yeah, 5 that are established, and 5 to 6 more that are interested in pursuing that process. So they're just working with the Neighborhood Association Society on getting that set up.
Okay, now you had 274 people who responded to a survey. Mm-hmm. 300 plus attended open houses, and then workshops and focus groups, another 580 plus. So that's over 1,000 people that you, got a feedback from when you started this process.
Yeah, and that was excellent. We were happy with that. It was quite a process. So we thought, surveys will capture some people that want to fill out, be online and give their information that way. We had some open houses through the city that we attended, which again, it just draws a certain person or type of person to those events, municipal mingles. But what we were really missing was just getting to people with lived experience or people that we maybe knew wouldn't have the capacity or the ability to get to sessions. So we coordinated with the help of the advisory committee specific engagement sessions where we would go like to the food bank, for example. We talked to some volunteers and people there. We had an international event where we had people from the Connection come and talk to us about some of their experience as new Canadians or new to Medicine Hat. We met with seniors. We had school kids from within the school. So we connected with supported living. So, some people that have a lot of challenges and we don't often hear their voice in our community. So we really wanted to make sure we could go to them and get that information directly from them.
That's the key. You went to them instead of sitting back and waiting for them to come to us. You made the first move.
Yeah.
And it paid off in spades.
It did. It was actually very interesting to hear perspective. And I think for me, the biggest thing about that engagement was these are people that don't have a lot, maybe struggle with different issues, and their perspective was very positive. It was very eye-opening and encouraging, and, they don't need for a lot. And they had some really great perspective and a really positive tone to it as well.
It might be intimidating for some people to approach the city on matters like this, so you obviously made it feel comfortable for them.
Yeah, we had it right in their apartment buildings in the staff area. We got pizza, and one of the gentlemen even ran over to his apartment and made us some sweet treats to share with the whole entire group. So it was just a really great positive experience, I think, for everyone.
Now, you've got a copy over there of the document. I don't know how many pages it is. I printed some of it off, but it is a voluminous document, and it's a living document, if I understand it correctly. It's not complete yet.
Correct. I think as we go through some of the objectives and the actions and then the tactics specifically related to the actions, the objectives are very broad. There's 9, and they're quite ranging from poverty reduction to economic development to truth and reconciliation to engaging with our neighbors. Like there's lots of pillars that define well-being, and so that's what makes the document so large. But there's lots of ability to kind of look at the objectives and some of the actions and say, there's different ways that we can do this work, and we'll try some ways and see how that goes. And that's the kind of living part of it, that we can continue to work and develop those.
Okay. I want to go through some of the headers that are in here because they ask good questions, and the answers, I think, are important. First of all, what influences our well-being?
Right. Well, I think in the report, and I don't know exactly all the pillars off by hand, but there's quite a few.
There's a Venn diagram here with lots of them here.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like, well-being is complex and multifaceted. So there is a lot of different parts to it, and different for everyone, right? So some things that might be important to me for well-being aren't important to other people. But generally, you see kind of the main parts of well-being that are important to people, and so I think that's reflected in the plan.
And well-being changes as you go through the stages of life.
That's right.
If you're a preteen, you have certain things that you think are important to your well-being. You get into your 20s, your 30s, and as you keep climbing the ladder, things change.
Exactly, yeah.
And so you were able to get a consensus from all those different age groups and demographics.
Yeah, I think they all seem to align. Like there might be some differences between youth and aging population. There's definitely alignment and connection and belonging, and people feeling safe and feeling heard and having the ability to learn new things no matter what age. So that definitely you could see across the board.
You also have some barriers listed here to well-being, including limited rental stock for housing and unsuitable housing. Mm-hmm. That is something that is foremost in people's minds right now.
Yeah, housing crisis kind of across Canada, across the world, I'm sure. But, really hopeful that with some of these new builds, and that's one of the things I highlighted at council is, one of the areas we're moving with this is having more apartments being built. And so that creates more capacity within our community, and hopefully, if not reducing the prices, at least stabilizing them somewhat over the next few years. So we're hoping to see that as these buildings are up and accepting people.
And that, I think one of them is being built down near Kipling Street, is it?
So that's the affordable housing. Yeah. So that specifically is for people of a certain qualifications. So, more affordable housing we can get as well is very important.
Yeah. Financial challenges too, including the increasing cost of living, financial literacy. These are some of the other barriers to people's well-being.
Yeah. While finance alone doesn't, get someone out of poverty, there's lots of factors. It's definitely a big piece of it. And I think somewhere in the plan, we talk a bit about income, and that includes things like paying a living wage and people having the resources to spend their money in our community, having some extra money to actually spend on things beyond housing and food.
To live.
Yeah.
Yeah, not just exist.
Exactly.
Yeah. Some other identified barriers as well were resource limitations, limited facilities for the houseless population, barriers to accessing mental health and addiction services.
Yeah, and those, I guess it could be a bit controversial that we have that in our plan as a municipal plan, because they are provincial responsibilities primarily, but we recognize that those things affect our municipality, and so advocating for changes and continuing to look at what do we need for our community is important. And so that's kind of what we reflect in the plan, is how can we support and or advocate or push forward initiatives that support mental health, addiction, and housing.
Social connection is another one that was identified as a barrier. Isolation, lack of community acceptance impacts your social well-being.
Yeah.
People are lonely.
That's right. And I know What Matters to Hatters will tell you that being lonely is the equivalent of smoking. I don't remember how many packages of cigarettes. So it impacts your physical health and all the other parts of you as well. So that's something that our department is really looking at. Like, how do we get people better connected? We have a neighborhood connections micro grant. We've run it for the last 3 years or so, and it's just small grants to neighborhoods that can apply and do some kind of either a traditional block party, or even something where you have a skill and you want to teach the rest of your neighbors how to do that skill. So you get everyone together, just a way to know your neighbors and connect with your neighbors. And so the city said, we'll put some money into that. We'll help people to kind of coordinate that, and they can figure out what they need to do in their neighborhood, as long as it includes everyone in their neighborhood, and that, it's collaborative approach.
Trying to build community.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's important at that neighborhood level. Like, we have lots of events and we support events on a bigger scale, but what we're really looking for in that particular one is small scale, like knowing your neighbors. And I know I went to a conference a few years back, and they were talking about parks and recreation in neighborhoods, and knowing at least 6 of your neighbors, like actually knowing them, knowing their name and being able to go talk to them, increases your mental health by quite a bit. So, that's a pretty impactful statement.
Well, bring back the porch. The theory behind it was back in the day when everybody had a front porch, you would sit out there in the evening and your neighbors would come over and you would have conversations and you got to know people.
So great. We have a porch and I love it. There are so many neighbors that walk by in a path and you can say hi and connect, and it's so nice.
Transportation, limited public transportation, lack of options on statutory holidays, and alternative modes of transportation identified as another barrier.
Yeah, and so that's one of the areas that we've moved a bit with transportation, as I mentioned at the presentation. The Accessible Transit did a review and made some changes and recommendations based on the needs of people accessing the transit. And then they did extend some holiday hours. So I think it was 3 this year so far, just to see how that would work and what the uptake would be. So those things definitely help connect people in the community for sure.
And that's part of this process, is communicating within City Hall and all the different departments to make sure they know what's expected of them. It's not like a surprise.
Yeah, communication and collaboration internally is something that is one of our corporate values, and we really feel it's important to have that communication and be talking from a social perspective to other parts. That's why you'll see in the plan it's very broad. Like I said, there's economic development, there's environmental stuff, because everything is connected. People's well-being is all related to all of those areas. So we really need to internally communicate and collaborate on important issues.
We've touched on this briefly, but another barrier was supporting vulnerable populations, lack of programming for seniors, youth, single parents, and individuals with disabilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we definitely see that. Vulnerable populations can be very broad and wide for sure, and we've got some great programs going that have just been implemented in Medicine Hat related to seniors. Very happy to see some of the funding from Alberta Healthy Aging coming to our community to support some projects to make sure that seniors are connected and engaged. And same with youth. We've been doing a lot to try to see, what is important to youth, because it looks different and every generation looks different. So it's a constant trying to get engagement from youth and then find out what's really important to them.
Yeah. The big question that struck me when I looked at the summary here is, what role does government play in well-being and what role does the city play? Mm-hmm. And I guess the other half of that is, should the government be involved in this? There would be those who would say they should. But.
Yeah. And it just comes down to the different levels of government and the different responsibilities. And it's not, I think, really well known in our community what is provincial versus federal versus municipal responsibility. So, defining that and for people, I think, is something that we're looking at going forward, just to make sure people understand what that is. But also, just because it's a provincial responsibility or federal, we know as a municipality that we have some part to play in that, because that impacts our community. So just what does that look like, and how do we define our role, and how do we help, again, with advocacy and defining what's important to our community?
I think Councillor Ted Clugston, when he was visiting here, he talked about how to let people know the impact that local government has in their lives. And he asked, I think it was a school class that he was speaking to, he said, have you interacted with the federal government today? And they kind of went, not really. What about the provincial government? Maybe a little bit in terms of, a few programs. But then what about the city? You drove on a road today. You maybe took a public bus. You saw a parks crew working. It is the level of government that is most visible to the people of Medicine Hat.
Exactly. That's all they know, or, is first in their minds. So we acknowledge that and try to work within that. I know my team last week just did a session with some of the Crescent Heights High School students around understanding different levels of government. And so trying to get to people at a younger age to help them understand what that looks like is important as well.
There's also in the document some demographic information, which I thought was interesting. 45% of the people you surveyed felt the quality of life in the city had gotten worse. I don't know what the time frame was, but...
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I think that's just...
That was in 2004 when they were surveyed, but I'm not sure what they were comparing.
What the reference was, yeah. And I'm not 100% sure either. But I would say I think we've seen over probably the past 10 years quite a change in just what's visible. And so I think a lot of times that people see that and think, that affects my quality of life. It's not easy to see people unhoused, people, wandering around downtown. So... there's a perception sometimes that it's hard for people that plays into what they feel around community safety and well-being, for sure.
29% of respondents listed social challenges as a top priority too, which dovetails with what you were saying.
Exactly.
You mentioned Thrive in 2017, the last time, that's about 9 years now. That did you use anything from Thrive to carry into this? Yeah,
so the consultants did most of that kind of literature review and look throughout that to see what kind of aligned with that. And there was definitely some alignment changes for sure, but definitely that was used as this kind of to build on the work of Thrive and not just completely redo everything.
Just not like a report that got filed on a shelf and forgotten.
It did a bit. So this one is not. So
that's why I say it's a living document.
Yes.
Yeah. Now you mentioned the pillars.
Yeah.
What are they?
The pillars of well-being were on the first page, and I don't remember all of them.
I have them written down here.
Oh, perfect.
Basic needs.
Yeah.
Safety. Education. Employment. Health. Equity. connection. And then there's 52 potential actions, I think, from those pillars too. So you're identified a flow. It's not just, okay, here it is, and you walk away from it. This is how you're going to get to it, your objectives.
Yeah, so those are the objectives, and 52 related to all of those, and then further tactics kind of related to each of those actions. So it is a big plan, and there is priority items. We can't do it all. That's one of the reasons that this is really a community plan. It's not about the City of Medicine Hat saying, what are we going to do on our own? It's about our city for sure and different departments within it, but it's also about the community and our partners, our organizations that do work in our community, individuals. So it's a plan from the community for the community.
Okay. Number one in the objectives, I think, is reducing poverty. Mm-hmm. That is a big one.
There's lots of objectives under that one. Yeah. And poverty is complex. We know that there's many facets to that. And so we're really just trying to look at what are some of those facets and how can we affect those and, maybe bring that up a bit. I don't believe poverty will ever be completely gone. No. But there's definitely things that we can do, and there are things within the plan that everyone in our community can work towards.
Enhancing community safety.
Yeah, so that's what I was kind of talking about. And sometimes it's the perception of safety more than the actual safety, but both need to be addressed. And so just looking at how do we make sure our downtown and other areas are cleaner, and we talk to people that are impacted by changes in our downtown and really involve people with lived experience in some of the solutions to those problems.
Promoting health and wellness is another one.
Yeah, and that's, again, pretty broad. And again, generally health and addiction is a provincial priority. But there's lots of things related to health that we can support and hopefully achieve some changes there.
This is one I like, supporting lifelong learning.
Yes, I love that one too. And talks about intergenerational learning. I think that's one of the things that we have been focusing on the last few years is how do we incorporate some of that learning from different generations learning together. That
intergenerational is very important. I see it at the different end of the spectrum now. I remember when I was young and I'm not sure I really want to have anything to do with older folks, but now that I'm an older folk, yes, I do. I want to know what the young people are thinking, what is important to them, and maybe give them a perspective that they don't have.
Yeah, and I think a lot of youth don't always know, the perspective of aging adults, and we have some great programs happening in our community through Learn, an intergenerational program with people from the high school and those that are living with dementia, and just kind of learning together. And those students are like, wow, I think I want to actually work with seniors when I get older. And so just even exposing them to some opportunities and to see what that looks like is a great opportunity.
So when you understand the other generation, then you become closer to them.
Yes, and they've built some really awesome connections, so it's really positive.
Number 5, and I don't know if these are listed in any priority list, but this one to me is maybe should be at the top of the list, to create and enhance economic opportunity. Because if people have jobs and they're working and they have money, a lot of these other problems might not exist.
Totally, yeah. And that our economic development department is doing a really amazing job. They have a plan and they have lots of work that they've been doing in that area. So that overlaps quite a bit with the work they're doing. But yeah, it really is about bringing people to our community, but also having the resources to support people when they come here. So, if there's opportunities, but there's no housing or there's no childcare, that can impact whether you want to come to our community. So that's a big one.
And enhancing and celebrating diversity.
Yeah, that's the important one. And diversity is a very broad term in this case. So just people from all walks of life and people with different abilities and people, newcomers, and not just from other countries, but from other communities. So just really celebrating that we can be a diverse community and we should be accepting and encouraging about that.
And reconciliation.
Yes, we have been doing a lot of work from a city's perspective lately with our new Indigenous Relations Coordinator, and there's always so much more to do. This is an area that definitely needs a lot more focus, and so we're happy to be moving forward somewhat on that.
And empowering engaged participants.
And that is my favorite.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because if they might be engaged, but if there's nothing for them to do.
Yeah, that is, about that, making those connections in our community, feeling a sense of belonging, really working together and collaborating, and knowing your neighbors, right? Like that to me is, and our community is so great for that. We do have lots of connections, but there's people out there that still struggle. And so how can we create environments where people feel connected and engaged in a positive way?
Yeah. And number 9, enhance organizational efforts to support well-being.
And this one's more internal, so it's more about how do we as a city, how do we advocate or allocate our resources towards ensuring that this plan is fulfilled? What does that look like? And part of that, as I go back again to this being a plan for the community, so it's not just us doing all the work. We want the community to be part of it because we can't do it alone. Like the city and our capacity is just not that robust, and so we really need the partners at the table to consider, what they can do in their organizations or what individuals can do in their neighborhoods to help not only get to these goals, but then, how do we know we're being effective is the other piece. And that's, a piece that's, it's a big part of this. And then prioritizing, because you have 52 actions and many potential tactics related to that. So what is most important to do now? What are some things that are already happening that we can move over the finish line, or what are some priorities that might be in place?
And this document, will it be part of the, the ongoing strategic plan that the council is working on?
I hope so.
Hope they do it that way, yeah.
Yes, I hope so. And we hope to have some more information on our website to talk about where have we gotten with these objectives, so the public can go on and say, objective number 1, reduce poverty, what's been happening, what's happened so far, and then we can put the information in there for the public to see.
What's next now? Where does this go?
Yeah, this is ongoing, right? Mm-hmm. So we just continue to work through each objective. We have actually I'm very excited about an upcoming momentum kickoff grant, it's called. So it's a $10,000 grant for community organizations. They need to have a project of some sort that maybe they have been wanting to get going, but they haven't had the capacity, or they want to add to an existing program. They can apply for this grant, and it has to be related to the objectives within the plan. Okay. So our way of really trying to move forward with some of the objective and the strategies, and have our community more involved. And there's been lots of excitement around it. So the closing date is this Friday at 3:00. So we're looking forward to seeing what applications we get, and then moving forward with some of those projects.
Well, if someone wants to, they can find the entire documents, both executive summary and the longer form, on the city webpage. Yep. And as we say, it's a living document, so maybe we'll check back with you in 6 months to a year and see how things are going.
Yes, hopefully we'll have much more information. People can also find information on Shape Your City, Medicine Hat, the full the engagement report, so what we heard and what we the research information that the consultants did is on there as well. So if anyone wants to take a deeper dive into the engagement pieces or the research pieces, then that's available on Shape Your City as well.
Shona Dickie, thank you for the visit.
Thank you for having me.